The unfolding clash between the United States and Venezuela has taken a dramatic turn as President Donald Trump addressed the nation in an urgent broadcast. In his statement, Trump declared that the United States would not tolerate what he called state-sponsored smuggling operations tied to Venezuelan vessels. The announcement came shortly after the U.S. Coast Guard intercepted a ship suspected of operating under Venezuelan command and seized an astonishing 5,900 kilograms of cocaine, one of the largest maritime drug busts in recent history. Images released by the Coast Guard show stacks of tightly wrapped cocaine bricks offloaded onto U.S. soil, each package catalogued as evidence. Officials described the operation as a decisive strike against narco-trafficking networks believed to be linked with regional cartels that use Caribbean waters as a smuggling corridor into North America. The Venezuelan government quickly condemned the U.S. actions, accusing Washington of aggression and unlawful interference in its maritime affairs. Caracas insisted that the ship was conducting legitimate cargo operations and claimed the U.S. fabricated evidence to justify political hostility. Inside Washington, the Trump administration framed the incident as a matter of national security. Trump told reporters the seizure demonstrated America's iron resolve to defend its borders, disrupt criminal networks, and hold rogue states accountable. Analysts say the bold language signals a hardening U.S. stance toward Venezuela, already strained by sanctions and disputes over oil exports. At the international level, allies of both sides are watching closely. The United Nations has been urged to convene an emergency session to prevent further escalation. Whether this becomes a wider confrontation or remains a high-stakes standoff will depend on the next moves by both nations. For now, the cocaine bust has elevated tensions to their most volatile point in years. The tense drama unfolded on the open waters of the Caribbean as the U.S. Coast Guard moved to intercept a massive Venezuelan-flagged cargo ship. According to official reports, intelligence tipped off American authorities that the vessel was carrying an enormous shipment of illegal narcotics bound for international distribution. In a carefully coordinated operation, multiple Coast Guard cutters closed in on the ship, supported by helicopters circling overhead. Loudspeakers ordered the crew to halt and prepare for inspection, but initial resistance escalated the situation. Eyewitnesses from the Coast Guard described the moment as incredibly intense, with Venezuelan sailors shouting back in defiance. The ship attempted evasive maneuvers, weaving through Caribbean waters, but U.S. patrol boats boxed it in. A helicopter beamed a bright searchlight down onto the vessel, underscoring the seriousness of the American command to surrender. Eventually, boarding teams armed with rifles and tactical gear climbed onto the Venezuelan ship. Within minutes, the Coast Guard discovered large sealed compartments packed with suspicious cargo. Drug-sniffing dogs confirmed the presence of narcotics, setting the stage for what would later be revealed as one of the largest cocaine seizures in U.S. maritime history. The Coast Guard released dramatic footage showing officers carefully cutting open tightly wrapped packages, each revealing bricks of pure cocaine. Stacks of narcotics filled the deck as evidence crews documented the find. According to U.S. authorities, the total weight exceeded 5,900 kilograms, enough, they said, to fuel cartel profits for months and flood American streets with dangerous drugs. Venezuelan officials denounced the interception as a hostile act and accused the United States of staging the encounter. But within Washington, the operation was hailed as a decisive demonstration of U.S. resolve on the high seas. Once the Venezuelan vessel was brought under U.S. control, the full scale of the operation became shockingly clear. On the docks of a secured U.S. port, Coast Guard officers began unloading thousands of tightly sealed packages from the cargo holds. Each brick, carefully wrapped in plastic and marked with cartel insignias, was methodically catalogued as evidence. The sheer volume of cocaine, stacked in towering piles, stunned even seasoned law enforcement officials. The Coast Guard confirmed that the seizure totaled nearly 5,900 kilograms of pure cocaine, a street value estimated at more than $160 million. Officers in protective gear used specialized scanners and trained dogs to verify the authenticity of the haul. Reporters, allowed limited access to the scene, filmed the massive piles of contraband as agents carefully stacked and documented every package. Rear Admiral Peter Brown of the Coast Guard described the bust as a historic blow to international drug trafficking networks. He emphasized that the mission was not only about seizing narcotics but also about dismantling the financial backbone of powerful cartels. According to U.S. intelligence, the cocaine shipment was likely destined for multiple international markets, including routes into the United States and Europe. In Washington, the Trump administration wasted no time linking the incident to Venezuelan state actors. Officials alleged that the Maduro regime has allowed criminal organizations to operate freely under its protection, effectively turning Venezuela into a hub for transnational narcotics. Trump, in a statement, declared that the seizure proved America's vigilance and its determination to stop poison before it reaches American shores. Meanwhile, Venezuelan officials rejected the charges, calling the seizure fabricated theater. Despite the denial, images of mountains of cocaine bricks broadcast across global media told a very different story, one of a daring U.S. operation that struck deep at the heart of cartel logistics. Inside the White House Situation Room, President Donald Trump gathered with senior military commanders, intelligence chiefs, and Coast Guard leaders to assess the aftermath of the Venezuelan ship interception. The atmosphere was tense but calculated, with glowing digital maps projecting shipping lanes across the Caribbean. Red markers indicated vessels under investigation, while real-time footage from Coast Guard drones displayed the seized cargo ship now under American custody. Trump sat at the center of the long table, flanked by Defense Secretary officials and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Reports were delivered one after another, outlining not only the details of the 5,900-kilogram cocaine seizure but also intelligence linking the operation to Venezuelan-backed networks. "This is proof of state-sponsored trafficking," one official told the president. Trump leaned forward, nodding, before declaring, "We will not let this stand." The Coast Guard presented tactical footage of the boarding operation, drawing praise from Trump for their precision. Advisors discussed next steps, including sanctions, expanded naval patrols, and closer coordination with regional allies like Colombia. Some urged caution, warning that Venezuela could retaliate by rallying international support against Washington. Others argued that strong action was necessary to deter further smuggling attempts. Trump appeared resolute, emphasizing the need for maximum pressure on Caracas. He instructed his national security team to prepare options ranging from economic penalties to increased maritime blockades. At one point, he reportedly told commanders, "If they want to test us at sea again, we'll be ready." Photographs later released by the White House showed Trump pointing at the map as generals and Coast Guard officers looked on. The images were intended to project strength, signaling to both allies and adversaries that the U.S. government was treating the incident not as an isolated drug bust, but as part of a larger geopolitical struggle. The fallout from the U.S. Coast Guard's massive cocaine seizure quickly spilled onto the global stage. Within hours of Washington's announcement, diplomats clashed at the United Nations over the legality and implications of the operation. The U.S. ambassador presented photographs of the 5,900 kilograms of confiscated cocaine, arguing that the evidence was undeniable proof of Venezuela's complicity in transnational drug trafficking. She accused the Maduro regime of harboring criminal cartels and warned that continued cooperation with such groups threatened regional stability. Venezuelan representatives fiercely rejected the allegations, calling the U.S. operation a brazen act of piracy, and claiming that the ship was engaged in lawful trade. Caracas insisted that the so-called evidence had been fabricated to justify American aggression and undermine Venezuela's sovereignty. Heated exchanges echoed through the chamber as allies of both sides took their positions. Cuba and Nicaragua voiced support for Venezuela, condemning Washington's actions, while U.S. partners such as Colombia and several European nations backed the Coast Guard's operation. Outside the UN building in New York, crowds of protesters and counter-protesters waved flags and chanted slogans. Journalists from around the world reported live as the diplomatic standoff escalated. Analysts noted that the incident had moved beyond a drug bust, becoming a flashpoint in the broader struggle between the U.S. and Venezuela over political legitimacy, security, and influence in Latin America. In Washington, Trump hailed the growing international attention as proof that America was leading the fight against narcotics and corruption. But critics warned that the aggressive stance risked dragging the U.S. into deeper confrontation. For now, the world watched closely, uncertain whether the crisis would lead to new sanctions, negotiations, or potentially even a dangerous escalation at sea. The seizure had clearly changed the tone of U.S.-Venezuela relations, pushing them into their most volatile phase yet.